In this video, I'll be making a Muskoka sock scrunchie on an Addi King size circular knitting machine. You'll need some spool elastic, or you can use a hair scrunchie. I'll be using Patton's gray and white worsted wool yarn, as well as a ball each of Nitka Merino Delight in white and red. I'll also be using a couple balls of waste yarn, a darning needle, an angled plastic Addi needle, and my handy scissors. I find that Heartland yarn is also a great yarn to use if you don't use Nitka. I'll also be using a G or F size crochet hook. To get started, we'll cast on with some waste yarn by hooking on the first hook and weaving back and forth until we complete one full rotation. And we'll knit 5 rows of waste yarn to create a stable foundation for our scrunchie. And 5. Now we'll cut our waste yarn and attach our project yarn for the first few rows of our scrunchie. We'll be knitting 4 rows of Patton's classic worsted gray and white yarn. Now we'll do 2 rows of our cream or white yarn. And 2. And now we'll do 2 rows of red. And 2, and now we'll do 5 rows of cream. This is where the scrunchie is going to crease. That's 5, and now we're going to do 2 rows of red. That's 2, and now we'll do 2 rows of cream. And that's 2, and now we'll return back to the gray and white yarn, where we'll knit for 4 more rows. And 4. Now at this point, I'm going to tie in all my ends so they don't come apart. And at this point, I'm going to thread my Addi angled needle with the gray and white yarn so that I can pick up all of the stitches off of the machine. Now we'll set our machine aside, bring back our piece and stretch it out. Bring back our crochet hook to seam the edges together. As you recall, I neatly tied the ends in together, and now what we want to do is look for where the gray and white rows begin on each side so we can match them up. We've got the start of a gray row here, and we have the end of the gray row over here. At this point, you have an option where you can put a hair tie on the inside right now, or you could leave it out and use an elastic band and string it on the inside later. So to prepare the piece, fold the piece with the right side out, where the seam goes along the white large edge, and do this throughout. Then match up the starting and the ending row of the gray rows, and you can either whip stitch them together or use a crochet hook to seam the 2 sides together. This is done by taking the opposite side loop and pulling it into the other loop and continuing all the way across from side to side until you seam the entire piece together. And I will meet you on the other side. we're just finishing up the last few stitches of the seam and pulling through the last bit of yarn, and then I'm going to release the waste yarn and remove it from the project, but not before tying the loose ends up. I'll weave those in afterwards. Now we'll remove the waste yarn. For this side, you simply give it a bit of a tug and release the top piece of yarn from the waste yarn, and then once we've done the whole top row, then we'll be able to unravel it. Now I'll insert about 20 centimeters of spool elastic into my scrunchie piece. Now I thread the elastic through the knit piece simply by either using a darning needle and threading the elastic into the darning needle or the Addi needle and pulling it through the piece, then joining the two ends together and tightening it. You can have a set length there if you like, but I just check it around my wrist. And then tying a knot. We'll snip off the excess and then hide the elastic inside, and then plump up our scrunchie and get ready to weave in our ends. And voila! The finished Muskoka sock scrunchie!